author of Hybrid Tapestries, Muneeza Shams, and art historian Samina Iqbal, moderated by Naazish Ataullah, artist and former principal of National College of Arts, Lahore. Welcome, ma'am. Oh, sure.
Hello everybody, just let me know if you can hear me. I'll speak with my best teacher voice. It's a great pleasure to be here today to talk about Athea Begum and Samuel Fyzee Rahamins. And I have with me two very eminent people who have been working on both the Fyzee Rahamins, and I would like to just introduce them to you, although they really don't need any introduction. Everyone knows Muneeza Shamsie extremely well for her pioneering work on Pakistani English literature, Pakistani poets writing in English, and her wonderful book, which was published in 2017, Hybrid Tapestries, The Development of Pakistani Literature in English, that is sadly out of print, and we are desperately looking for a new edition to come out. She has edited 3 anthologies of Pakistani English literature. She is an award-winning author, and I could go on and on. So, hello, Muneeza. Good to have you here. Then we have Samina Iqbal. I'm proud to say that she is my former student from the National College of Arts. She is a practicing artist and an art historian, and an academic. She is working currently at the Lahore School of Economics in their Department of Media Studies and Art and Design Studies. She is also a much published writer and researcher. She has worked on modern art, the early years, 1947 to 57, and that has been her real focus of interest and research. And she has worked on Samuel Fyzee Rahamins' work as well. So I want to just take you back to immediately after partition, and the Fyzee Rahamins that these two wonderful speakers are going to be talking about. But I just want to say that it was the Qaid who actually invited them, Athea Begum and her husband, to come from Bombay to Karachi. And we are talking of Karachi in the 1950s and 60s, and in the 1950s, Karachi was the capital of Pakistan. And all the activity that you can think of, the kind of vibrant, cosmopolitan environment of Karachi and the cultural environment of Karachi is something that we're going to refer to. Now, in this quest to unpack what they were doing, I got in touch with several people. Being a Karachi wala myself originally, I knew that Athea Fyzee's family, particularly the Tayyabjis, were in Karachi. Tala Tayyabji was very helpful, and she gave me lots of little bits of information, even sent some articles and so on. And then I was in touch with Durya Qazi, who again made very important comments on Samuel Fyzee Rahamins' work, and of course, Hamid Haroon, who in 2004 mounted an exhibition on the Raj and called The Jewel in the Crown, Sindh and the Jewel in the Crown. And in that exhibition, there was a lot of work that Hamid managed to bring into the Muhatta Palace for this show. And after that, everything was wrapped up and put away, and it went back into the annals of the KMC and the Evan-e Rifat, and we will talk about that a little later. But I would like to start basically with Muneeza and request her to talk about both Athea and Samuel.
Thank you very much, Najib. It was such a pleasure for me to be here and talk about Athea and Samuel Fyzee Rahamin. They were such a remarkable couple, and they made such an enormous contribution to women's rights, literature, and the arts. But their extensive literary work is so little known in Pakistan that I discovered it by chance and ended up doing a chapter on each of them while on my book, Hybrid Tapestries, The Development of Pakistani Literature in English. Then, while I was working on it, luckily Sunil Sharma and Siobhan Lambert-Hurley brought out an excellent book called Athea's Journeys, which included a translation of Athea Begum's Urdu travel diary, Zamana-e-Tehsil, which was originally serialized in Tehzeeb-e-Niswan. And it was the first travelogue really about an Indian woman and her experience of the West. Athea Begum, writer, musicologist, women's rights activist, choreographer, promoter of subcontinental arts and crafts, was born in 1877 in Bombay into the emancipative Fyzee Tayyabji clan. She became such a legend that it was said, "Come to India to see the Taj Mahal and Athea." Some people claim that this refers to another remarkable woman, the novelist Athea Hussain, a generation younger. Well, Athea Hussain was my aunt, my chachi, and all I can say with certainty is she was named after Athea Begum Fyzee Rahamin, who was actually a family friend of our family in Lucknow, particularly my paternal grandmother, my dadi, Inam Fatima Habibullah, who was a feminist, parliamentarian, and Muslim League activist. But the memoirs of my mother, Jahanara Habibullah, describe Athea Begum visiting princely Rampur in 1924. And my mother writes, "During the reign of Nawab Hamid Ali Khan, the legendary Athea Begum Fyzee Rahamin and her sister, the Begum of Janjira, came to Rampur. They were regaled with honors and were invited to tea at our house. I remember that Papa ordered that we girls appear in farshi pajamas and pay our respects, although Behen Fakhra and I were both very young. She was overjoyed to see us and praised the embroidery and the artistry of the Moghlani who had made the clothes. I remember she said, 'This is the true dress of the Muslim era.' She cherished the culture of a bygone age. God had blessed her with such graces. She was fluent in Persian, Arabic, and English. Her husband, Fyzee Rahamin, was a renowned artist who had set up organizations in Bombay to encourage the growth and development of art, music, poetry, and painting. She was a wonderful conversationalist and knew thousands of couplets by heart, which she would quote with ease. Nawab Hamid Ali Khan had met her in Bombay and had the honor of calling her sister. She corresponded with Bernard Shaw. Maulana Shibli Nomani was so impressed with her that he had written Persian ghazals addressed specifically to her. What greater honor could there be? So that's my mother, memory of Athea Begum. But in the early 20th century, Athea Begum organized women's conferences to empower Muslim women. In 1907, she joined a teachers' training college in London and wrote her pioneering travelogue. But there she also met the celebrated young Urdu poet Allama Muhammad Iqbal. Her famous memoir, Iqbal, written 40 years later, tells of this friendship and includes Iqbal's letters. In 1912, Athea Fyzee married the acclaimed artist Samuel Rahamins, and that really changed her life. Of course, he belonged to the Beni Israel community, and he had converted to Islam. And in an assertion of gender equality, in 1912, so rare at that time, the couple assumed the surname of Fyzee Rahamins, combining his name and hers. They were a cosmopolitan, internationally known couple. They traveled to America and other lands and were showered with praise. He exhibited in galleries. She wrote about India for the international press and curated exhibitions on Indian handicrafts. In 1914, she wrote her great classic, Indian Music, which went into several editions and includes spectacular illustrations by Samuel. She explains, I sang the eternal limpid melodies. Rahamins immortalized them in a series of beautiful paintings, the ragas and ragnis. I dashed off a few lines in explanation. We soon left for Europe, where the written text was brought out in a book form and helped to explain the symbolic significance of ragas and ragnis. Indian music is a very fine example of creative English nonfiction, which covers the legends, origins, and history of subcontinental music, as well as the technicalities of musical instruments, scales, ragas, and so on. In the 1930s, there was a new trend in Indian English literature, which was, to convey the independence movement and so on. And Samuel wrote 2 English language plays written for British audiences aimed at promoting the culture and customs of India alongside the egalitarian ideals of the independence movement and a critique of empire. Athea Begum composed music and choreographed dances for both plays. The first, Daughter of Ind, opened in London during the week-long celebrations marking the coronation of King George VI in May 1937. And the story is of Graham, a newly arrived young, liberal, Oxford-educated British colonial, and his friendship with Malti, the gardener's daughter, which actually ends in an honor killing. So she prefigures the work of much later writers in many ways. I mean, he does, Samuel. Similarly, the second book, Invented Gods, was staged in 1938 in London, and it tells the plight of a Hindu child widow and captures also the complicity of westernized Indians with the colonial power, alongside the suffering of a woman and her quest for spiritual enlightenment. Samuel's 1938 novel, Gilded India, engages with Athea's Italian and Indian music, but it's set in a small Muslim princely state, and it highlights the power wielded by the ruler and his colonial supporters, and the vulnerability of his childless wife. The book was probably inspired by the marriage and divorce of Athea's childless sister, Nazli Begum, to the Nawab of Janjira. Mysticism and spiritual quest permeate Samuel's ornate creative writing, though his poetry collection, Man and Other Mystic Poems, is particularly notable for his spectacular illustrations. Inevitably, perhaps, his writing comes into its own with a very fine book on art history and criticism, which was published in February 1947, Indian Painting and Sculpture. In Bombay, the Fyzee Rahamin home, Evan-e-Rafat, was inspired by the architecture of the Alhambra in Al-Andalus, embodying a rich, tolerant Muslim symbiotic culture. And the home was focus of great cultural activity. They supported the Aligarh discourse on Indian Muslim identity and the call for Pakistan. The Quaid-e-Azam, of course, was a personal friend. In 1948, the Fyzee Rahamins and Nazli Begum migrated to Pakistan. They named their new Karachi home Evan-e-Rafat in memory of their Bombay home, and similarly set up the 3 Art Circle to promote the performing arts. They created a museum for their fabulous art collection. They held exhibitions, promoted young artists, and planned to involve craftsmen in a proposed center, Hunar Nagar. Their home was frequented by artists and writers, politicians, diplomats, and eminent citizens, and they showed rare films, such as the Bolshoi ballets, Romeo and Juliet, which included Galina Ulanova, the great Galina Ulanova, which I saw aged 9. And I can recall my intimidating introduction to Athea Begum. She was dressed, I mean, my memory, this is my memory, she was dressed in a dark chiffony sari and her head was covered, and I dutifully performed a low adab. Whereupon she asked my parents, Naam kya hai? What is her name? Well, my name is of Persian origin. You know, Muneeza comes from Manije. And Athea Begum protested, Farsi, Farsi. I remember this so clearly. And then she gave my parents this long lecture, which I didn't understand. They took it all in their stride. You know, people are entitled to different views, but they explained to me afterwards that Athea Begum believed that Muslims should look to their Arabic roots and discard the Persian. And all this while she spoke on, Fyzee Rahamin was there, and he was trying to sort of, in a subtle way, trying to, you know, calm her down. It's a sort of, I thought, it's a kind of wonderful insight into the two of them and perhaps their relationship, that he was such a, I think he was so supportive. Athea Begum was imperious and very outspoken. She planned to revitalize Muslim culture in Pakistan. She contributed articles to the Illustrated Weekly of Pakistan. She brought out an undated 10-page pamphlet called Gardens, a veritable treasure with photographs of Mughal miniatures and an informed commentary on Mughal gardens. Samuel published 2 undated academic works, The Hindu Aryans, A History, and Who Are We? Whence Do We Come? Where Do We Go? A phenomenal exposition of soul, mind, body, and human existence. And of course, Karachi, as Pakistan's capital, saw much cultural activity. You had Shahid Surawardi and Ahmad Ali bringing Pakistan pen miscellany. There were new women's magazines such as The Mirror and The Women's World. There were exhibitions of Chughtai and probably Zainul Abidin. And a new Karachi Arts Theatre, which performed Sophocles and Shakespeare, and also Khwaja Muinuddin's Lal Qile Se Lalu Khet Tak, which gave a new impetus to Urdu theatre in Pakistan. And these activities, of course, had included the young Zia Mohyuddin. In the 1950s, the Fyzee Rahamins gave their art collection through a trust deed to the Karachi Municipal Corporation. But in 1958, they offended a powerful official. Both of them and Nazli Begum were evicted from their home with all their possessions. And as Nazli has told you, Najji, I'm going bonkers. Najji, they found refuge in a hotel on Kacheri Road. And I cannot tell you how delighted I was at the renewed interest at the exhibition they held at Mohata Palace, which had some of Samuel's paintings and some of Athea Begum's artifacts. And now, of course, Samina is doing this wonderful work to revitalize and recreate interest in Samuel's work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Muneeza. So, when the Fyzee Rahamins, along with Nazli Begum, were evicted from their home, Evan-e-Rifat in Karachi, they moved into a hotel. And the hotel was located off Kacheri Road. And Athea's nephew, Arif Luqmani, owned the hotel, which was called the Deluxe. And they had 3 or 4 rooms given to them. And it's actually a very sad story for them personally, because they went into deep penury. Salman Rahim told me that she used to sell some of her jewelry in order to survive. And that they were both aging by that time. They were in their 80s. And then they fought a case, and the buildings were given back to them. But that time, they did not want to actually move out of the hotel. And in 1964, Samuel Rahamin died. And in 1967, Athea Begum died. And then her sister died a year later. And both of them are buried in the Suleimani Bora cemetery, Qabristan actually, in Karachi. Now Athea Begum, as Muneeza has told you, came from a very eminent family of Suleimani Bora. She had relatives that were all over India in really important positions. She was great friends with the Begum of Bhopal. She facilitated Shibli Nomani in writing that Siratul Nabi for the Bhopal state. And similarly, she was always connecting people. She was in Hyderabad. She was in Hyderabad. Akbar Haidari was related to her. And in fact, it is said that Allama Muhammad Iqbal was introduced to the state through Athea Begum. Now we come to Samina's work on modernism and on Samuel Fyzee Rahamin's contribution. His paintings, drawings, books, papers, letters are all housed in the current Evan-e-Rifat in Karachi. And we'll talk about what to do next after Samina has presented his work. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Naazish. So I have the most fun part. I have lots of pictures to show you. And I really want everybody to enjoy looking at the works of this great artist. And I titled my paper as Fyzee Rahamin, the Lost Star. But before I start my presentation, I have tons of thank yous to say. First of all, Lahore Literary Festival for sponsoring my research, using their connections to open the doors for Evan-e-Rifat, and I was able to photograph and document the archives of the both, the power couple. And then I have lots of people in Evan-e-Rifat to thank who cooperated and helped me out a lot. 2 of my research assistants, one sitting here, Sabika, who generously, fixed the images for me, and another one who actually took all the photographs while I was frantically opening and packing the paintings during the process of documenting. So let me just start, and Madam Naazish gave a lot of introduction, and Muneeza introduced you, but just few points that I'm going to just reiterate. So Fyzee Rahamin is born in 1880 in Pune, India. He belonged to a Jewish family, who had settled Bani Israel, which was settled in India for centuries. And I just have like, some pictures that I have borrowed from other people and tried to give credit. So this was from the Chuktai Museum website. This is a photograph of Athea and Fyzee's wedding in 1912. And these are the two portraits painted by Fyzee. One is Fyzee and the other one is Athea Rahamin. So Fyzee actually went on to study. So first of all, Fyzee was not taken into school till at the age of 10. And the family didn't have enough money. So at the age of 10, the only option that they could afford, the family could afford, was the art school. So he was admitted in the art school. And he was admitted to the first grade at the age of 10. Then he studied, of course, art. And then, of course, seeing his talent, he was referred to go to Royal Academy, London, where he went on a scholarship. In Royal Academy, he studied under two of the celebrated painters, Solomon J. Solomon, and then John Singer Sargent, the American painter. So his training in Royal Academy was really on the lines of Western or naturalistic European academic painting. And I'm going to just show you a few images so you can just grasp the kind of skill he had and the accomplished artist he was. So these are all the paintings which are still housed in Evan-e Rifat, unless I have, credited the person, or the institute. So Fyzee returned to India in 1908, and this was really Gandhi's nationalist movement that really inspired him to really take up Rajput painting. And looking back in traditional miniature painting. So there are writers who say that when you look at Ramin's work, it looks like magnified miniature paintings, the detail and the coloring and all of that. What really, I just want to quote one thing. When he returned to India, the reasons why he returned to India. So in Pakistan Quarterly 1949, S. Amjad Ali quotes Fyzee on leaving Europe. He stated that there is much to be learned from the West in terms of techniques and ideas, but both are foreign, and the real self of the Eastern can never flower in alien surrounding. It would be like the Bengal tiger hunting to seal in the polar region. And he completely considered European naturalism to be incompatible to Indian idealism, but the fact is, the irony is that he couldn't let go of the training that he already had. So you would see in his works the traces of what he was trained as portrait painter. What really caught my attention of Fyzee was looking at this one title which was published on Pakistan Quarterly's title page, and I totally fell in love with this, and I was ecstatic to see this portrait still in Evan-e Rifat, of course not so much in a good condition, but still it's there. And so what you're seeing is the current situation of the painting in Evan-e Rifat. And when it was published, so this is from, I think, 1952 Pakistan Quarterly's issue. So like Muneeza mentioned, the power couple, in a sense that they both complemented each other's work. Writing, Athea was writing, and Fyzee Ramin was also making illustrations for the music books, but then also other things that they were doing together in terms of promoting the music, but then also accompanying those musical notes and ragas with his paintings. So there are a few of these images which are from their, oops, sorry, I skipped one, from the book that they published. This is a painting from the book. I I do want to admit to one thing, that I have not been able to find the titles yet, because this is fairly a new research for myself. So the dates and the titles of the paintings is something that I'm still working on, and it just needs, so the whole idea and the goal of doing this panel was to bring and highlight, you know, the research areas that we can look at. Sorry. This is Athea's sister sitting in the middle, Nazli Begum. The most beautiful painting, and it's humongous in size. This is an image that I just plucked from the side of Baroda Museum, because I wrote them several times. Nobody ever got back to me, so I just said if I give enough credit, they'll let me go. And then I also want to talk about Fyzee's work being published in Pakistan Quarterly twice, as Sayyid Amjad Ali was writing on his work. But then Fyzee Rahamins himself was also writing about miniature painting, Orientalist art. But the reason I brought this in is because, you know, the way we're doing the research is like kind of collecting pieces through different sources. So one of the things that Fyzee was really celebrated was this Imperial Secretariat, New Delhi's museum, domes that he painted. And I want to show you the pictures of that dome that I could only find in black and white. Madam Naazish also tried several times, contacted in India people to send us photographs, but we didn't get any photographs. But luckily, I found a sketch of this dome in Awane Rifat. So I think, like, you know, this somehow came with him when he came to Pakistan. And this was on paper. I also want to now bring in an exhibition that happened in Mohatta Palace in 2004 under the title of Jewel in the Crown, sorry. And during this exhibition, Hamid Haroon was able to showcase Fyzee Rahamins' paintings, and then Athea's collection of jewelry and textiles. So Muneeza talked a lot about Athea's, you know, her contribution towards writing, but then she was also an avid collector of like artifacts, like coins and textiles and you know, handwritten manuscripts. So a lot of those things were also, you know, showed in this exhibition 2004. Unfortunately, there is no documentation available of this exhibition. These were few pictures that Madam Naazish was able to get from Arif Mahmood. And one thing that I thought was very intriguing in this exhibition was that this Imperial Secretariat dome was recreated through the prints in that exhibition. I wish that somebody had taken good pictures of it. But this dome earned Fyzee Rahamins a lot of fame and respect in India. This is an invitation of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth that is still in her collection. And so basically this was an exhibition of Fyzee from 1929. Fyzee was really well established in London when he was living there. So I emphasize the point for him to return to India, but then also to like take this initiative to move to Pakistan in 1948. That is something very interesting and, you know, something that needs to be looked into. So while he was in London, he had several shows at different places. And so this was one of the invite. Here I also want to mention that recently people have started looking at Fyzee Rahamins. So one of the scholar who's a doctoral student at Goldsmith and Tate, he's actually looking at how the British culture has completely erased the memory of Fyzee Rahamins, although he was the first one to be collected in Tate Museum, the first Muslim artist, I should say. So I just borrowed an image, and then I also want to show you something else. So this is one image which was painted in the dome of Imperial Secretariat, New Delhi. Oops, sorry. So some images from Tate's collection. There are 2 paintings in Tate's collection. If I look at Fyzee's work, I haven't done yet a critical analysis of all his work, but generally looking at the overview of his work, it can be divided into 3 phases. So you look at the first phase, which is about like portrait painting, European academic style. The middle phase is something when he comes back to India and adapts the Rajput painting, he explores the two-dimensionality of Rajput painting. And the third phase I consider is this one, which seems like he was really inspired with the Chinese Tang blue-green school, where he's also moving towards spirituality, looking at the relationship of man with nature. And so there's one more in Baroda Museum. Again, I wish that I had dates, which would give us more understanding of his work. This is an image that was published in one of Fyzee's book, which was called as The Man and the Mysticism. And this is where he's writing poetry and also making illustrations with the poetry. So then I found several, so there is a huge trunk in the Awane Rifat, which I was luckily able to open it, and there were like 63 sketches of Fyzee, doing it like, freehand drawings and then, illustrations. I'm sorry, the flicker is like acting up. So you can just see the beauty of his line, and I think that was one of his quality that, modeling he would do through building lines. He was also a collector of Japanese prints. So I think I'm looking at it and also thinking that, it's very natural that he was attracted to the Chinese Tang school as well. And so they were these were original prints, woodcut prints, but they have all sort of the colors have been faded, not in a very good situation. I was able to see his brushes. I'm going to just quickly give you a little glimpse of Athea's collection, because I thought this is really imperative that, we just kind of look at the kind of exquisite taste she had in terms of collecting things. So a lot of tapestry, textiles, and saris and tablecloths, and manuscripts, handwritten manuscripts. One thing I really want to show you is, so these are Athea's diary, beautiful handwriting, and I just didn't have time to just open and photograph and document each one of them, but this means it needs somebody from the audience should do a PhD and spend 3 years just working on this. And this is what I really wanted to show. So one of the diaries, and I opened and I looked at how she's using beautiful images that she found. And these are also from when she is on her travels to London and she's going by sea. And then she's also making visits to China and Japan and other places. So I thought this is beautiful to just look at how her visual sensibility comes with her textual intellect. Quranic script, handwritten. Fyzee's photo with Nazli and Athea. Some of Athea's jewelry. So coming almost towards the end of it, this is a letter that was written in 1952. And I want to read you. This was an inquiry that was made from Victoria Albert Museum to the Tate Museum, asking about the context of Samuel Fyzee Rahamins' artwork in their collection. And the person who was in charge for the Indian section very callously writes and completely disregards Fyzee's work and call it rubbish. And so this is something that, this gentleman, Hassan Wavda, he's working on, looking at how the history is manipulated and, how the colonial culture has completely eroded or excluded people from other cultures. And this is especially important because Fyzee is no doubt the most celebrated artist of his time. And while I'm saying that, it's also a pity that, we were talking about like, the British and the colonials, but, we in Pakistan, we don't even know who Fyzee Rahameen is. So I think like, it's high time that, we look at these things, and I will come back to this image in a minute. I do want to mention that Muneeza already mentioned so many of Fyzee's books. So I think he was an author of at least 8 books, which included 2 plays. And the books are not even available in Pakistan, except for Muneeza said that there's few copies, or like some of them are available at British Council, Karachi, British Library, Karachi, sorry. British Library, England, so nothing is available in Pakistan. Right, right. So I was able to get hold of few of the books. I did photocopy them. If anybody needs it, I can give it to them. So I think that's where I would end.
I'd like to go back and just, well, I'm looking at this letter and I'm utterly shocked because the letter has been signed by W.G. Archer. And it says, Skelton, M.R. Skelton, away for a fortnight. And of course, this is something that is pretty shocking to me. And I'm sure that others over here would also be shocked by Archer writing such a rude letter. But then this is what it is, the way that work was accepted, celebrated, rejected, pushed away. Anyway, to go back to the 50s, and Samina, thank you so much for really, really unpacking a lot of very essential work that we need to be thinking about. What are we going to do with it? Because you see, if you consider what is happening in the 50s in Lahore, it's quite a different story. You have the Lahore Art Circle, very important, eminent writers, poets, academics who are all meeting and about whom we are aware of their work. Today, we have Rashid Arai's work opening in Lahore, and it has been shown earlier. They're all these people, I mean, although Rashid Arai is from Karachi also, he was in Karachi. I'm sure in the 50s he was in Karachi, certainly, before he went off to England. But then he was, of course, engaging with Lahore. There was this whole discourse taking place. And in Karachi, it seems as if everything changed. Was it because the capital shifted from Karachi? Was it because of just the neglect of bureaucrats and officialdom that actually such eminent people who had come originally, we are told, with 200 paintings and countless boxes full of photographs and letters and documents and of artifacts, as Samina told us. And what kind of a state are these things in today? And what are we going to do about it? So I'm going to address this to both to Muneeza as well as to Samina, that what is the way forward? So Muneeza, what do you think we should be doing?
Well, to start off with what we're doing today, I hope, is to generate interest and to really bring out, it's one thing to say there was this couple and their letters and all are locked up, but it's another thing to actually talk about it in a session, to see these kind of wonderful paintings, to see this ghastly letter from the V&A, it's terribly important for one thing to, well, I think the best thing to begin with is to generate a dialogue, to get it out, to get people really passionately involved in it. And I have not really quite understood why that we keep hearing about Evan-e-Rafat, there's going to be renovations. I mean, I've been hearing this for years, but for some reason, I'm not entirely sure why, it has never happened. And I hope, I mean, I think it's absolutely wonderful that you were given access to it, that you were able to even get near this collection. So maybe that is, let's look at it as a glimmer of light, and let's hope we can go on from there.
Yeah, well, I do think that Samina very tactfully approached the people who are currently looking after this collection in Evan-e-Rafat. And they were actually quite helpful. But what she needs is access to their accession registers to see what was in that deed that they gave, the original deed that was given to the city. She needs access to that, or someone needs access to it. And it has to be a collective effort. And it's not enough that occasionally paintings and other things are taken out, they're put on display, and then they're put right back. Durya Kazi told me that for many years there were paintings that were hanging in Frere Hall. And there was, there was dust on these paintings, and there was pigeons flying all over the place, and pigeon droppings on these paintings. I mean, just the sheer neglect is something horrific. So I want to get back to Samina, and perhaps then we can open up for a few questions from the audience.
So I quickly want to show something, and I also want to not blame the people who are now taking care of Evan-e-Rafat, because they're just really kind of there to take care of it. But I think it has to be addressed on a higher level. But let me just show you something. So this is one of Fyzee's humongous painting, which is by 6 by 4, and that was the only piece I could find which was stuck to another painting. So we just took it off and just put it right there. And so the situation, just look at, this is like, I just looked at this portrait and this was breathtaking. Look at the technique, but then, so when you say pigeon droppings and rainwater and whatnot, so, the collection has been shifted several times. So it was so when Fyzee and Athea were evicted, they lived, like you said, in the Deluxe Hotel, and everything was packed up in suitcases, and however, then after Athea's death, it was all moved to Frere Hall, where it was on the roof somewhere in the ceiling where there was water seepage and whatnot. 1979, it came back to Evan-e-Rafat. And nobody had ever opened those paintings, which I actually was able to open them. So I think for me, so another thing I wanted to mention was this was one painting that really broke my heart, because it was very badly retouched. So the part where you see there is a flower, kind of a medal, which was some amateur painter, and it reminded me of that Italian Madonna's painting that somebody had worked on. And even the outline is not Fyzee's work. So I think for me, the most important thing is that these paintings needs to be, first of all, need to be properly documented, because the way I photographed them, they were really in glass, we were hanging upside down, lying the paintings down, because there was so much reflection. So we just quickly took the photos, but they need to be photographed properly. They need to be conserved. So I don't know, in Pakistan we don't have any kind of things that we would call conservation. And then we have things that there are lots of records that we can actually look at, and you learn a lot, study them, and really formulate things. So like I mentioned, I felt incredibly at loss that I couldn't find any dates. I did find some titles in Pakistan Quarterly when they were printed in 1952, but that's about it.
We do have quite a lot of anecdotal evidence, but we don't have any kind of serious a project that has actually dealt with this work in an academic sense seriously enough.
Can we also mention the people who are now currently looking at Fyzee?
That's, of course, Shoban, Lambert Hurley, and Sunil Sharma. have published a lot on travel writing in particular, on women's writing, and of course Athea's travels, and on translating. Sunil has translated, because Shoban doesn't know Urdu, but he has translated work from Urdu into English. And I was desperately looking for the book. Didn't manage to get a PDF, but did manage for Sammy Ray, who kindly sent me a copy and said that I have to send it back to him after I've read it. And so these books, some of them really do need to be reprinted. And of course, who else did you look at? So can we go back to that slide? Hassan Vauda, again, Samina is in touch with him, who's at Goldsmiths. Mortimer Chatterjee of Chatterjee and Lal in Bombay is working on another contemporary of Samuel Fyzee Rahamins. Partha Mitter has, of course, written about quite extensively on those murals in the Secretariat in his The Rise of Modernism. And The Rise of Modernism, incidentally, is out of print and is now available at the shocking price of £672 on Amazon. So you see, this is the state of how we proceed with research and so on. If there's a very quick question from someone, please do ask it. No? Okay. Well, then wish us all luck and join in this great effort and keep up the fight. And I hope that we will be able to do something in Karachi.
Can I quickly tell something? There is a calendar that Lahore Literary Festival published. So that has Fyzee's paintings on it. So if you are interested, I mean, the paintings are on the calendar. No commission.